All right, and we are live, everybody. Dr. Zeigler, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, so
What do you
happy to
think
be
of the
here.
setup?
This is awesome. This is great.
You like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a real professional setup. I'm excited for this. We've been waiting to have you on again this semester.
Awesome. Super happy.
Jake, do you want to go ahead and give us an intro of who Dr. Zeigler is?
Absolutely. So we've had Dr. Zeigler on one of our episodes before, and we're bringing him back. He's also been a feature guest on some of our other social media posts. But Dr. Zeigler is a professor of exercise science at Grand Canyon University. He is a fellow of the ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine. He's the head of GCU's research department. He has his PhD in physical activity, nutrition, and wellness. He has 2 published books, including the Weight Loss Bible and the 24-Hour Weight Loss Program, and he's a husband and father of 5. It's great to have you on again.
Awesome. No, it's good to be here. Yeah. By the way, between 2 dumbbells, freaking love it.
Awesome.
Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, Jake's getting good at those intros. No stuttering, nothing. He's just
I
like
know.
he's rapping it going through. You
Practice,
Great.
getting the reps in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
love
for
it.
sure.
Yeah. So we know you're pretty much the king of weight loss here at our department. You have so much knowledge about it, so we just wanted to kind of focus on that, at least to start this podcast off with you.
Yeah.
Kind of as we did last time. But we want to focus on keeping the weight off, because we know there's a lot of problems with people who are losing weight, doing a great job with it. They hit one roadblock and they gain it all back and some. So what are some tricks or tactics you have, or you can even go into the physiology behind why people aren't able to keep their weight off?
Yeah. And that's hard, because if you were just to ask, can people keep their weight off, I'd probably just say no. Right? Generally speaking, they can't do it. You look at the statistics, it's like upwards of 95% of people are not going to keep it off. You go out 6 months, 6 months is peak. And the more you follow them, or the longer you follow them after that, the more weight they're going to gain back. They did a meta-analysis that went out 4 years, and it found that on average weight loss was like 3% of people that were on these weight loss studies. And the authors were really excited about that. Then other researchers did a follow-up study 5 years, and the weight loss was 0. So if we just talk on average, you follow somebody long enough, they're gaining the weight back. Now, we have these individuals who are like one-offs, right? People who we know, everybody might know somebody who's kept weight off for a certain period of time. So we can look at those and say, what have they done? The government has started the National Weight Control Registry, which is where if anybody's kept weight off for a year, they can go to this registry, they can state what they did to keep it off, how much weight they've lost, and that kind of thing. And from there, we can kind of take some general ideas of these successful losers. And they're things like exercising at least 60 minutes a day, 6 days a week. They all eat breakfast. Some of these basic things that they just keep doing it. So they can give us some ideas on what can we do to be a successful loser.
Okay. Kind of on the topic of breakfast, do you think that eating a first breakfast meal in the morning is crucial to weight loss? Do you think it could be done easier with or without it, or does that play a big factor?
This is such an interesting topic, because if you look at correlational research, right, doesn't establish cause and effect. All of it shows an association between people that eat breakfast are more successful lose weight. When you look at randomized controlled trials, none of them show that. I'm thoroughly convinced breakfast doesn't matter. Now that it's important though to understand that. So eating late in the day is not good. So we have research that has come out that shows that upwards to 30% of gene expression from your fat cells are diurnally regulated. So meaning if it's the morning time versus the nighttime, your fat cells, the genes that are being expressed are different. And so the genes that are expressed later in the evening promote the body to want to store that fat more than eating earlier in the day. So I'm not saying that you should be eating your calories later in the day at all, but nothing suggests that it has to be first thing in the morning. And most of the people I counsel for weight loss, it's easy for them to skip breakfast. So I say, fine, skip breakfast, but your lunch should probably then, if you're skipping breakfast, should probably be your most important meal of the day. Most people aren't hungry during breakfast anyways. And if you want to adapt more of a time-restricted eating schedule, why not do something that's easy, right? You skip breakfast, eat lunch, have a snack at like 3 or something, eat dinner at 6:30, and then stop eating, and then you'll fast from 6:30 to about noon the next day. And people tend to be able to stick with a schedule like that anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You said this is diurnally regulated. Is that vary from person to person? Is that genetic, or is it pretty much the standard for everybody?
So that's a good question. So lots of it's dictated by melatonin onset and when you're releasing melatonin. And we know that's different from everybody. And so, yes, it's different person to person. The concept doesn't change, though, as far as generally speaking, you want to shift more of the calories earlier in the day versus late. The problem is when that is, people will always ask, well, when should I stop eating? I don't have an answer to that. And so I think it's the easiest just to say, don't eat after dinner. But you're right. Some people can get away with eating a little bit later than another individual. You look at night eating, excuse me. If you look at like shift workers, they have the worst health out of anybody else for a lot of reasons. But one of them is they all eat their calories in the wrong period of time. And that's driving a lot of these other negative health outcomes we see with them.
Are those shift workers, are those the graveyard shift workers, or you mean just people who just work random shifts?
Sorry, no, graveyard. And nurses, now things have changed a little bit, but they used to have the worst health out of any occupation because they work graveyards, not all of them, but the ones that do, and then they have the stress and all those other things. But a lot of it can be tied into, and not just nurses, but others that have to work the graveyard shift, eating at that wrong period of time.
Okay. So we want to typically eat most of our calories earlier in the day because later on we're on that circadian rhythm, that kind of internal clock that tells us store fat later on at night.
Yeah.
Because it's rest and digest time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you link that back to breakfast, nothing's wrong with breakfast, right? I eat breakfast, that's great. But when you take people that don't usually eat breakfast and you intervene and say, I want you to start eating breakfast, all we've done is added calories to those people and they don't lose weight. So if you're already eating breakfast, that's fine. But a lot of people, you have to step back and say, what is the most effective weight loss diet? And I've said this a million times, it's the one that someone can stick to. And so the idea with time restricted feeding, I think, is kind of easier to do. And what I mean is you don't count calories. It's just, I'm only eat from noon to 6 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And those people are still the same kind of people that aren't eating breakfast. So it's just easy to say, make lunch that big meal. And then, kind of tailor that down to dinner. So you and maybe have a snack or so, but then don't eat after dinner. Most people can stick to that. And that's why I'm a fan of it. It's nothing special. But if someone can stick to it, then that's the best diet, I think.
So pertaining to that subject, would you say that there's more to the equation than just simply looking at calories in, calories out?
100%. And me saying that is not going against the first law of thermodynamics. Obviously, if you overeat or undereat, that kind of thing plays a role. But if you were to try to mathematically calculate weight loss, to say, all right, Jake, let's say you eat 2,000 calories for maintenance, I'm gonna remove 500 calories a day. If we look at calories in, calories out, you should lose a pound a week. You'll never lose exactly a pound a week. It never works that way. The hardest thing with trying to apply this mathematical equation, and it's a linear equation, right, where I'm just going to cut 3,500 calories out of my diet and I will lose a pound, is the body doesn't work that way. The moment that you start cutting calories from your diet, or adding calories if you're trying to bulk up, you start cutting calories from your diet, your metabolism shifts, your thermic effect of food shifts, your spontaneous physical activity shifts. So my point is, we have no idea how many calories you should eat anymore. And that's the problem. And it's not as if the average person who's dieting is going to keep going back to some lab to continue to have all these things measured. So it's just a guessing game.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
We're still working on that chemistry.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
That's what I love about doing this. We're like building that chemistry over time. It sucks we're graduating. But no, I was going to say, I think that's the beauty of our field and exercise and training people with weight loss, putting on weight, whatever it is. You go to somebody at the gym and you're like, dude, how do you put on so much muscle? And they're like, oh, I do this exercise, I eat this way. And then you try it and it might work for a little bit, but it won't work fully for you the way it works for them because everyone's body is different. And I know that's what makes our field like very theoretical and makes it kind of difficult at times, like getting into it, like, whoa, what do I do? But I think that's what makes it so cool is that we have the opportunity to just try new things and be creative with how we get people to lose weight, gain weight, whatever it is that their goal is.
Right. And I totally agree with you. I think it's the idea of the art and the science, right? So we'll talk about the general principles of the science, but applying that to each individual, that's the art. And you're right. That's where we're going to have trial and error. You go back to the weight loss. We try one thing. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Let's shift to something else. And that's why I think you could take any weight loss diet, and someone can effectively lose weight on any weight loss diet that we're presenting to them, because they're so different and they might have different things that work for them.
Yeah, and we really are like almost like detectives in a way, because each person is a different case, and you have to figure out, okay, what are you eating throughout the day? What does your lifestyle look like? And one thing that we don't really talk about too much in this field, but you mentioned it earlier in class, those soft skills. So important, because that is really what people care about. If they gravitate towards you, then they will keep coming to you, and they'll bring people who they know. They'll be like, hey, I know this guy, and he's great. I'm seeing results, and you have those soft skills. You can communicate, you can talk to them, and that goes a long way in this field. And that's something you can't really teach unless you get out there.
Oh, I remember, and I won't say the name of the place. I worked at this studio in the Valley here, and one of the owners was a very well-known professional. She was a professional, I think it was figure competitor, right? So she had her IFBB Pro or whatever it's called for them, and everybody wanted to train with her. And I was training in this same studio, and I remember I would watch her with other clients, and she was on her phone the entire time. And she would say, oh, go do lunges across, down and back, and she'd be on her phone. And there was no connection between her. And slowly over time, because I was there for a while, everybody migrated from training with her, who she was this big pro, to these other kind of no name, quote unquote, but they cared. They gave a crap about the person. And in the field of training, that's it. You invest in that person emotionally, they'll stick with you. And I think that's like the number one thing I think you need to look for to work with somebody.
I think it goes along the line of when you are selling someone your program, you sell them yourself.
Oh yeah.
And you have to be that person who they want to be with, at least for some type of role model in the training field, the nutrition field, any of that. Going back to your point of just we have these scientific facts, right? But like you said, every person is different. Every person's like an individual case study. It's almost like a combination of objective scientific fact and personal experience that makes a success story. But I think that's what makes it so fun. And this industry is so new. We're learning so much.
It is. I think you're right. And that's both pro and con, right? Meaning the personal experience. You have the pro where it is exciting. It's like, what worked for you? Let's test this out. The con, though, is sometimes you'll have somebody where there is a lady who marketed herself as what was the name? It was interesting. She was a eating disorder warrior, and she marketed herself as this on Instagram. And she had said she got herself out of this eating disorder, which, and I'm being very sensitive to this topic, like I totally get that. But because she got herself out of this eating disorder she had in this way, now she felt like I'm this expert to help everybody. Well, the state of Texas sued this lady because she was causing a lot of problems with these people, because she was saying, well, I did this, I'm this expert, and this worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. So one of the benefits of a general education in dietetics or exercise physiology is going back to what I said earlier, you get the science and then you tailor the art. Sometimes we see this flipped in our field, especially with social media, where someone becomes famous and an expert because they're just popular on social media. They have the art, but they've never learned the science. And I don't think you can go the other way.
And you just put in big words in there, and people will be gravitated towards you. Like creatine phosphate breaks down, and this enzyme does it. Yeah. And they're like, I've never heard this before. This guy must know what he's talking about.
If you sound 5% smarter than the person you're talking to, you're going to sound like a genius to them.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and it's very easy to dissuade people, which I think we need to definitely kind of work on in this field, is that words hold power over people. Just in general, words hurt people, words help people. Knowledge is power. And the more knowledge that I learn in this field, the more I have to like keep myself in check and be like, don't let your ego get to you where you're like, oh, I have so much knowledge now. I'm an expert at this, and I can just tell people, my friends back home at the gym, like, I know what I'm talking about. You really have to stay open-minded, no matter if I just got your bachelor's or just got your PhD. We had that interview. You were there, Antonio Esquilanta. I think I said his last name right. Do you remember him? And he was like, we're experts in our field, or we're specialists in our field, but we'll never be like fully masters of it, because we have to keep an open mind. Always reach out for help, always admit when you don't know something, and always stay open-minded, because as soon as you become closed-minded, then you're in this field for the wrong reasons, really.
And I think that helps you if you're reaching out to somebody to help you as a coach, a trainer, a nutritionist. I think you look for that. The people who are acting like they know everything, you'd still steer clear of those individuals. I've said this, maybe you've heard me say this, but someone once had said to me, and it makes so much sense. Someone gets their bachelor's degree, they think they know everything. Their master's degree, they realize they don't know anything. They get their doctoral degree, nobody knows anything. The more you learn about your field, the more you're realizing, man, I don't know the answer to this. I have a good guess, and I know what the literature says, but there's a lot of door for interpretation, or people are so different, and that's a good thing to have.
Mm-hmm. Would you say you, being an expert in weight loss, or not expert, but studying weight loss, would you say you know everything that the science kind of has to offer? No.
I mean, I think that I can give a really good consensus of the current state of the literature, and I think that's the best that you can do. The current state on pick a weight loss drug or weight loss technique, and this is what we say. But then every scientist, a good study is going to open up the door for future studies and more questions. And that's what makes, honestly, that's what I think you were kind of alluding to. That's what makes the field fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we stopped that, then that's kind of boring. But you'll never get to that point where you know everything. And we want to keep asking questions.
And why do you think in this, as the years go on, we're seeing obesity rates are getting higher and higher? And obviously the population's increasing, so that kind of has a part in it. But with an increase in social media, there's another factor, and everyone likes to pick sides, be like, it's only social media. It's because everyone's fat and lazy. I heard that from one guy on a Jubilee Middle Ground video. Have you seen that?
Yes.
With the one guy?
That's what my roommates and I do during our downtime.
Really?
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes. I'll have to show you, Zach. We'll have to do a React video with it. I actually did add it for you. But there's this one guy on there who was saying, because they had middle ground, fit people who were like really buff and in shape come on, who were maybe celebrities or average Joes. And then they had people who were really fat come on, and they were like, let's establish middle ground, and let's talk about, is this genetic? Is this lifestyle choice? Everything in between.
They'll
is
ask
this attractive?
different questions throughout the video, and they have the agreeers come in and talk about it first, and they bring in the disagreeers, and they all...
Yeah, and there was this one guy on the fit side who said he used to be fat, and he was, and now he's fit, and he said if you're fat, there is no excuse under any circumstance. Any circumstance. If you have hypothyroidism, doesn't matter. A genetic predisposition, which I know you say is a lot of obesity and gaining weight. He said, not an excuse. I did it, therefore you should be able to do it as well. And he was grilling these people, and it was really sad to see.
But this is back to what we just said, right? Somebody had success on anything. Right here we're talking about weight loss, the female getting out of an eating disorder. Therefore, I did it this way. You can do it this way. Totally negating the fact that we know that there's completely genetic differences between the individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the problem with that.
And they had overweight individuals on the show who were completely healthy. They had one who was a model. He had great blood work done. He was in really good health. He was in the overweight category, maybe obese.
Mm-hmm.
But you know,
so the question then is, who cares?
Exactly.
This is always where I go. So if you are healthy by metrics that matter, blood pressure, lipid panel, glucose, all these kind of things, what's the big deal? And people say the most asinine things like, it'll catch up to you. I don't know what that means. Like, I really don't. They say, well, what's going to catch up to you?
We just say it.
No, they say it. Like, what does that mean? Like, it means nothing. Like, that makes no sense from a scientific standpoint. And so some of the problems that we have, I feel like we have this contrary to prove. And most things in life I've learned are contraries, meaning there's two sides to it, right? Contrary number one, we're getting bigger. And I think most people agree that's probably not a good thing. And I agree that too. But contrary number two that we have to also identify is just because you're in the overweight, maybe obese category does not mean that you're unhealthy. That's also true. And I think both can be true, right? But it's important to recognize both those things.
Yeah, and people are so concerned about the way we look. I'm concerned about the way you look. You're concerned about the way I look. Everyone's doing it. Like, that's the health standard now. And I see too many people that I'm close with that fall into that trap and are like, oh, look at that person. They're fat. They're overweight. I'm like, well, how do you know they're unhealthy? Like, how do you know they're going to die soon just because they have more fat than maybe you do or maybe I do? Like, that's one thing that we definitely need to work on as a society is kind of changing that standard because there's so many ways to measure health.
Well,
go ahead. I was saying social media has created that stigma. Going back to what you were saying, where there's two sides, I think both of them contribute to what's going on here.
And I think it might snowball too because, yes, I think social media creates that. And especially for our young girls, I think about that a lot. I have 2 young girls, and I'm that mean dad. They don't get social media. I just don't even want to expose them to it because we put so much pressure, I think, on young women. If you look at Miss America, right, it's supposed to be the ideal. Miss America is supposed to be the ideal woman. And you look at BMIs over time, and now the average Miss America contestants in a BMI that we call, based off World Health Organization, undernourished, right, underweight. But our girls see that, and they say, that's, quote, quote, the ideal woman. Or we give them Barbie, and it's like, that's not a real figure. But the girls see that. Then they see all the stuff on the social media. So I think that it compounds, right? Girls see it, they try to get that, and I think it creates issues.
Yeah. No, it does. And it's sad to see because you see a lot of like gymnasts, especially females. They have to keep that figure.
Right.
And they're always, their coaches are always checking up, making sure they look a certain way. Cheerleaders, that's a big one. Miss America and beauty pageants. And if you were to, I've seen it so many times with these cheerleaders, gymnasts, whatever, they are just mentally just so, they have such bad body dysmorphia.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like we look at them and we say, oh, they look so good. I'm so happy for you. You're an athlete. You're doing all these things. You're really skinny. But really, the mind is what drives the rest of the body to, do things and carry forward. And they are just distraught. And because that's all they knew growing up was saying, you don't look good enough. You have to be this size. Otherwise, you're not good.
It is a big deal. And Jake, maybe you can attest to what I'm about to say too. When I was training at this studio, the studio focused on female aesthetic athletes. Every single female I worked with to help with figure fitness bikini, they all, whatever you'd want to diagnose it with, and I'm not diagnosing them, right? Body dysmorphia, some eating issue, they all had problems with that. And it just got worse, right? And so you're totally right. Like if we pick apart the body, you're going to be ultra obsessed with it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming from a background where you've participated in aesthetic sports, you get it. I do think it is a little more extreme for the female side.
I think so.
And obviously, the dangers and the warnings of how malnourished you can become as a female.
Right.
I think there are some more risks out there. But yeah, I mean, for any person doing it, you just have to be aware of what's going on. I think accepting the risks and going forward anyway is a lot healthier than denying that they exist.
Right. Mm-hmm. I do want to add one thing that we are back to this idea of a contrary. On one end of the spectrum, yes, we're over obsessed with leanness, but this is what we do as a society, and we try to overcorrect. And I don't know if you guys saw the Miss Alabama winner. Do you guys see this? Mm-hmm. Miss Alabama, this was a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, and she was a woman who probably was 350 pounds.
Really?
Who they crowned Miss Alabama. So here's the problem that we have as a society. I think, and we've all just kind of agreed that we're over obsessed with leanness, and I think that we are. But that doesn't mean we correct to be so crazy the other way to say there's no such thing, right, as being overweight. No, I think there's such thing, right? But it's unique to the individual, and that individual the individual's genetics should dictate what that is. But we do tend to overcorrect that and go a little extreme the other way.
We're either on one side or the other. We can't ever meet in the middle. It's got to be one side or the other.
True.
And it's sad, and that's what that kind of diversifies us.
Yeah.
Based off your research and kind of what you've learned in weight loss, how much of it would you say is genetic?
So if you look at just what the studies say, the first study that came out on this looked at identical twins, and let me back up. The first study that came out on this looked at adoptive siblings. They were twins, but they were put up for adoption. And these twins were put up for adoption, and sometimes they were separated at birth. And so you'd follow these twins until they were 50 some odd years old, identical, put up for birth, same genetics, and completely different lifestyle, right? Raised in a different household. It could be a different state, different environment of the home. And their BMI almost mirrored each other identically. From that first research, we said it was about 70% of somebody's BMI was genetically explained. Other research after that study, the research has been done after that has only added to that number, not taken it away, if that makes sense. So meaning you can look upwards to 80%. So 70-80% of somebody's genetics is someone's BMI is dictated by genetics. But that doesn't mean, we'll go back to that thing that you brought up with that guy. Say, if I did it, you can do it. Here's the thing. We have some of these oddballs, and I say that about that guy, who can do it. Let me give you an example. Biggest Loser used to be, I don't even know if it's on TV anymore, but Biggest Loser, you get these big people, they lose all this weight, and they did a study where they followed them for 6 years. Most people gained their weight back. There were a few who kept the weight off. The individuals who kept the weight off, though, their metabolism reduced by about 1,200 calories from what it was supposed to be. What that means is if they were successful losing weight, they were probably eating 1,200 calories for 6 years and exercising upwards of an hour and a half every day. That's the problem. Although what that guy said could be true, if somebody can do that, the average American will never do that. And is that what we would require for the average American? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so genetics, it does play a role. 100%. You can't discount the role of genetics. And it's bigger, I think, than most people give credit for.
Yeah. You've said that in class before. It's pretty high percentage. You said 80% just about
Upwards,
now.
yeah.
Upwards of 80%. If you tell people that, and you've also mentioned how the way you're raised as a child in terms of what your parents feed you, the household you live in, if they've been fighting all the time, they get divorced, whatever it is, that affects you. And how much of this does that play a part in terms of weight gain? The stress, the parents maybe feeding you a certain amount or not exercising you as much. How does that affect you as you grow up and stick with you for later in your life?
Childhood development is probably the number one factor that's going to affect obesity going forward for a lot of reasons. And this is important. I always go on this rant in class because I think it's important. We look at problems in society. This one's obesity, right? And sedentary behavior. And we always think that there is some external factor outside the family that can fix it. And I don't know why we keep trying, because it's never worked, right? The government hasn't fixed anything. They just haven't. And really, it's just the deterioration of the family that leads to all of these social ills. If we just make it and shrink it down to say, okay, let's just talk about obesity, sedentary lifestyle, that kind of thing. So we know that we're developing the fat cells that will be with you up in your young adolescence, meaning by the time you're in your early 20s, you're probably not going to develop any more fat cells, except for maybe extreme situations. So in that developmental period, what's going on in that home, right? Are you in a family that gets accustomed to, you have candy every day and extra junk food? If that's the home, you're probably proliferating these fat cells at a greater rate. So that would be the environmental factor, right? If the environment plays a role. In addition to that, so we have everybody regulates stress a little bit differently. If I was to make a loud noise in this little studio that we're in, all of our heart rates and blood pressures will go up. The rate at which our heart rate goes up will be different in between each of us. Like, how big of a stress was that? That's dictated by what we call the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The adrenal glands are what releases epinephrine or adrenaline and cortisol. We know that the sensitivity of that axis is developed in young childhood development years, meaning if you were in a home where mom and dad were fighting all the time, or maybe there was just a mom or just a dad, and one of the spouses were always stressed and kind of maybe not on purpose, but putting that on you, whether it was vocally or whatever it is, you have increased the sensitivity of that axis for the rest of your life, meaning now you're an adult and you're in a stressful situation and you just dump cortisol into your blood, which is going to cause fat accumulation, specifically in the abdominal region. And so those young years are so vital to say, am I going to set this kid up for future success? If we talk about the physical activity thing.
And the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, we know what that is, but I know for some people watching, they're like, where is that? Because the adrenal glands, those are the hats that sit on top of the kidneys. That's the way I learned them. But right. The hypothalamus.
So in essence, what we're saying is you, in your brain, you seeing a stress, perceiving that stress, and then sending a signal. Because you got to think, when we talk about the idea of fight or flight, right? God built us to where if I have to physically do something, my body should be able to be primed for that. So I should release hormones that will get me ready. We talk about adrenaline and other things that will help my body have the energy it needs to do that. Well, when we look at perceived stresses, or let me not even say perceived, but not physical. So go back to the kid that parents are fighting, right? The brain is seeing this and the body says this is a stressor. This young kid, the brain sends the signal to, I like what you said, the little hats on the kidneys, but these adrenal glands, and they're still being developed. And now these adrenal glands, which are responsible for saying how much adrenaline and how much cortisol should I be pumping out. Now, because you're young and developing, it's dumping a ton out. And that's just the way you've developed. And now you're an adult, and we all have stresses every single day. And this is now who you are. And you're just dumping this these hormones that promote fat accumulation into the blood.
Yeah, and people talk about all the time, some people are meant to be successful, other people are not meant to be successful. They're meant to be failures. And a lot of people, myself included, I've done in the past until I came here and started work on it. For the longest time, I'd say, I'm a failure. I can't change. And even in your 210 class last year, you said, and Havener said it too, that behavior change is very hard and it takes an extreme stimulus to kind of change who you are because it's ingrained in you from a young age. So how do you take steps to go about changing?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer definitively. My mother-in-law, she, maybe you guys heard this story. This was a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago during COVID. She took a Sunday nap. Sunday naps are the best. They're like godly naps. She took a Sunday nap. She gets out of bed and she just stepped a little bit wrong. And she's, how old's my mother-in-law? Probably 72, 73. She's osteoporotic. Just snapped her shin, just snapped it. Ooh. And she's very sedentary, right? She doesn't have a lot of balance. She's osteoporotic. And so it took a long time to get her better. And I remember thinking, and I even said this to her, Pam, you need to start being active, walks, whatever it is. And she did for a week or two and then back to normal. And I look at that and I say, that is an extreme event. And that did not get her to change behavior, at least long term. And so this is the problem. Like, how do you get it? It usually has to be extreme behavior, extreme things that provoke this behavior. But some people are motivated by a lot of different things, right? People might be motivated by if you're single and now you want to date somebody. There's other motivators, but you have to find them. But generally speaking, I say this in class, outside Jesus, I don't know if you're changing behavior. And it's so difficult. And that's one of the reasons that I kind of like to say, well, I'll get into the science field and give the science. And there's other people that are better than me on knowing the art of getting somebody to be motivated, but it's so difficult.
Exercise is medicine.
Right.
So speaking of that subject, hypothetical situation, say you have a client and that client is pinning a lot of excuses on his bad genetics, which is why he can't change. I mean, in the past, I've had to deal with clients who have said, my biomarkers are bad, my blood work is bad, I'm genetically predisposed to not succeeding in this field. How do you speak to that person to try to convince them otherwise that they still can make an impact and improve their health?
Yeah, this is back to the contrary of you got to be honest to the data that genetics plays a role. The other side of the equation, that doesn't excuse you of not doing your part, right? 100%. And so if we take obesity. Now, first of all, if the person, go back to what we said originally, if this person is completely healthy and they still need to exercise and are exercising, I don't care if they lose weight. Now, if they come to you and they're not healthy and they need to make changes, then we can motivate them, but we can get them to exercise and not lose weight and still see benefits, health benefits. And that's important to note. Usually we don't sell exercise well. We really don't, because we mainly sell exercise as a mode of weight loss. And as we've been saying here, exercise by itself is not a good mode of weight loss. But exercise is, and Wes said earlier, is medicine. Weight loss or no weight loss. And so my big thought, and we're getting ready to start a study on this in a little bit in the lab, is the idea is if we take this person, and here's the theory is, right now the model is a weight loss centric model. Your success of exercise is dictated by the scale, body fat percentage, whatever it is. Get rid of all that, and your metric of success, so I'm still going to exercise you, but your metric of success is how do you feel? Do you have more energy? We do want to look if they have blood pressure or lipid markers that are not good. Yeah, we want to measure those. Those are your metrics of success, because I am much more confident I can get those markers to change versus the scale. The average female wants to lose 35% of her body weight. Wow. So even if I exercise that female and she loses a pound a week, even though or even 2, you might be saying this was great. In her mind, that's my mother-in-law got on semaglutide. And if you hear all the stories of semaglutide, you can lose so much weight, and you can.
We'll be talking about that shortly.
Yeah, but this is the thing. In her mind, she should have lost, I think she probably wanted to lose 10 pounds a week. I don't know what she wanted, but she lost 2 pounds, which I think all of us would say that's fine. But in her mind, failure. This isn't working. Should I even be paying for it? So their expectations are so high when we focus on weight loss centric approaches that they quit. Mm-hmm. So I think if we can shift their outcomes to how do I feel, emotional health, psychological well-being, biomarkers, then I think we have much more success keeping them to stay exercising.
Mm-hmm. And if they're looking at it from the perspective like it's about getting to the destination. It's not about the journey. It's so much easier to burn out, fall off, whatever it is. And so if you're going on a weight loss journey or any sort of fitness journey or just whatever in general, you need to, not need to, I'd say need to, but really the best way to be successful is to focus on the journey and not the destination, and say, I am enjoying this now. I know progress will come with time. I need to be patient and put all that control into, I would say, a higher power, and just let it be. That's the best way to do it.
It's that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
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 I remember my first bodybuilding show, and it was all about the destination, right? This date, this event, I want this outcome. And because of that, I would sit in, and I was on a really restricted diet, I would sit and watch the Food Network and just write a list of, I'm going to eat that food, I'm going to eat that food. And then I got to the destination and felt like crap, first of all. But second of all, then it's just all that work for 3-4 months, whatever it was, out the window in the next month. It's just done. But that's maybe not as extreme, but the average dieter, that's it. Like they're focusing on the destination of, I'm on a ketogenic diet, a paleo diet, Weight Watchers, you fill in the blank, until this. And I'm shocked that they're surprised that once they reach the destination and go back to old habits, that they just regain all their weight.
Yeah. And their foundation is built off of not a solid foundation. And people are just, I'd say people, I do it all the time too, very impatient. And it's like, all right, here's my goal. I'm going to go solely off motivation, not discipline and consistency. Then you get to a certain point where you just fall off, return back to your homeostasis, back to where you were before, because you don't have a strong, firm foundation. You never fixed the foundation. It was like, we'll just avoid the root cause of the problem,
right? And
just kind of build from there. And then they get so surprised and when they fail and they're like, what happened?
I think the best example of what you just said of the root causes is when we look at bariatric surgery research. And bariatric surgery is our most effective form of weight loss. But even with that, you've got 33% that just completely fail. And if you go to these conferences that focus on post-bariatric care, one of the topics at every conference is, how do we get these post-bariatric surgery clients to stop becoming like raging alcoholics? Maybe it's not that extreme, but you look at data and you'll look at something like pre-subject, like if you took a pool of pre-bariatric surgery, maybe something like 3% had struggles with substance abuse. Post-bariatric surgery, it's 35%. And the reason why is they were pre-bariatric surgery. They probably, the root of their cause of obesity, probably relationship with food. You have bariatric surgery, it doesn't fix that. Yes, it shrinks the size of your stomach, but you still haven't taught yourself how to cope with life. You used to cope with life through food, but I can't now because I'll get sick. I shrunk my stomach, so I cope with it through alcohol or something else like that. And so I totally agree with you. We got to figure out what the root of that cause is.
Yeah, and for me personally, I'm obsessed with my body image, and it's gotten better as I've gotten a little older, but it's still there. And I always ask myself, well, why do you care so much? Why do we have to eat this meal at this certain time? Because now it's just not fun anymore. Right. Why do you have to do an extra set of this exercise? Does it really matter? Does the science say it does? But in my mind, I've convinced myself I need to do it. Otherwise, I'm a failure. So you ask yourself more and more questions. Why? Why do you feel this way? Well, it's because, I want to be strong and look a certain way. And you're like, well, why is that? Why can't you just be enough for yourself? We're like, well, growing up, X, Y, and Z, and I feel like I've always been the skinny guy. And then you start to realize, oh, wait, this has nothing to do with science or my fitness goals. This is my ego and that child side of me telling me that I'm not enough, because that's all I heard growing up. And that's really where it stems from.
Yeah, no, it does. I think it's the psyche and the physiology sometimes don't play together nice, right? Like what you just said, does the science say I have to do all of that? Maybe some, maybe not the other, but the psyche says I need to. Mm-hmm. I was a twin brother, I have a twin brother, and he was a twig his entire life. And I was always kind of a chubby kid until I hit puberty, got a little taller. And the way brothers do, he would just be like, Zach's the fatty. And I don't know, I can't remember if I cared at the time, but I feel like maybe that got into me enough to where I've like sports. I think I got into sports. And I feel like I probably liked the exercising aspect, maybe even more than the sport. And so like, to your point, I do the same thing. And I think that you're right to where it's the psyche more, and you got to fix that. first. Yeah, that's interesting.
And when that's ingrained in your brain from a young age,
Right.
so hard to change.
Oh, yeah.
And for a lot of people, they're like, well, this is just who I am. People don't change.
Right.
And they hear it all the time from other people. You always do this, and they hear the same thing, which reinforces that negative idea that this is who I am, and then they just become hopeless.
Yeah.
And once you lose hope, then really where do you have to go from there?
And I do want to say one thing, but just so I don't miss the chance of what you just said, because back to the contrary, I talk like this kind of stuff in classes, and sometimes I think students may erroneously think that I'm saying, no matter what, you are X, Y, and Z and can't change. I don't believe that. I think it is a complete farce that people can't change. I think that that's what society wants to tell you. You can change. Now, it might be harder for X, Y, and Z for different people, right? You have to do different things, but you can make a change. Mm-hmm. The importance of realizing the role of genetics and weight loss is so I can be honest with my client and tell them, this is what you're up against. I'll help you do it. But because of your background, your genetics, the way you were raised, you can still change it. We got to overcome these things. Right? But it doesn't mean that it can't happen.
That's such a good way to look at it. Work smarter, not harder.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Semaglutide?
Semaglutide. Yes. You read my mind. This is a really big subject, and there's a lot of mixed opinions on it. If it's cool with you, we'd love for you to go over the objective science behind it, what it is, why it works, and then we can go into your personal recommendations, personal opinions on it.
Yeah, so semaglutide, diabetes drug, right, originally, and then just recently, I don't know, what is it, 2 years ago maybe now, have been approved to use for weight loss. If you look at weight loss drugs, we can break them down in different categories. You have stimulants. Fen-phen, was this the 90s maybe? Fen-phen was an approved weight loss drug. It was phentermine and I forget the other one, but it was amphetamine, and it was approved and it was very successful for weight loss. But it was such a powerful stimulant, and it's crazy. This was approved, FDA approved, based off of one study, and people lost a lot of weight. But they didn't do follow-ups before they approved it to see if there was long-term effects, and it ended up increasing risk of pulmonary hypertension by something like 130%. It was crazy. And so it got pulled from the market. Even today, people that are my mom's age, so about maybe 70, are still suffering from valvular heart damage and other things from this drug. So you have and so that got pulled from the market. You still have stimulants that are out there that you can use. So you got the stimulant group. Then you have the appetite suppressants, right, where you take something where you just don't have an appetite. And then you have fat blockers. Ally, which is orlistat, you can get that over the counter. It's a fat blocker. The thing with semaglutide and these GLP-1s is it is completely different than all of those. And what it is doing, it is making your response to food not like it was before. Meaning, and let's go back to genetics. And this is why I'm not anti. Some people are anti-semaglutide for weight loss, and I'm not. I'm not saying I think that you should try maybe other avenues, but if us three, if we had, I don't know, let's say we have a plate of cookies here, and I like cookies, right? I'm going to assume you guys like cookies. We see that our food cue responsiveness, I mean, we see that what is now our body going to do to provoke us to want to eat that is not going to be the same. Most of the data shows that's genetically determined. So what semaglutide is doing is it is changing some chemistry in the brain to make it to where your food cue responsiveness isn't as high. So in essence, it's kind of like it's putting you on more of a solid ground with other individuals who don't have high levels of food cue responsiveness. And when you look at most of the naysayers of these GLP-1s are looking at things that will say, so you'll lose a lot of muscle mass when you're on it. And yes, there's a lot of data to show that. And we can come back to that if we want, because you'll lose a lot of muscle mass with any quick weight loss thing if you're not working out. But you do.
Is it just weight in general, or is it all fat and muscle? Like, how does it?
No, that's the problem. There is a lot of studies that show that because you'll lose a lot of weight, you go on semaglutide, that your average muscle loss, if on a weight loss program, is about 25%. And these are people that are not exercising. I mean, this is just diet. If you're doing it on semaglutide, that number goes up. And so the fear is you might get what we call this sarcopenic obesity, meaning you might be obese unless you lose all the weight, and then you're losing muscle mass, which is just making this worse. So that's a fear. And then the other fear is a lot of the follow-up shows when you go off it, you gain the weight back. And that's true too. So we got to be honest to those two problems. But if we look at the state of the weight loss industry, as what we were saying before with any diet, if you go off it, you gain the weight back. So there's nothing unusual there. And then the muscle loss thing can be mitigated if you simply do resistance training, which they should anyways. So I mean, those two things in my mind are not that big of a deal if you can counsel your person to get in the gym or whatever it is to do some resistance training. And, you know, this may be what they do. And that's not unusual for a lot of things. Like this might be you as far as if you want to maintain this weight loss. Those are the two big areas. The only last thing is we don't have, right, this is relatively new. So when you look at long-term studies with the outcome of these GLP-1s on weight loss, yeah, there's still some things that we're learning about it there.
And you said at first when you said, it causes a decrease in muscle mass and you lose fat as well, but also muscle mass, I was like thinking of like chemotherapy, for example, where it doesn't just attack the cancer cells, it attacks all the cells. But then you said resistance training can help. So what exactly on a cellular level are these drugs doing to a person?
It's nothing. I'm glad you said that because I think that makes the distinction. It's 100% affecting appetite pathways.
Like
that.
hormones.
That's it. Yes, but it's not even so much as hormones as the way you perceive the food. So if you talk to anybody who's taking this drug, they're just not hungry. Let me just go back to my mother-in-law. She's been on it for a few weeks now, and she has to set a timer to eat, which is not her. Like that's never been her I know when to eat, right? Yeah. But because she's just not hungry. So the problem is because this is distinct. This isn't like chemo where it's attacking cells. It's just that sometimes they're just not eating enough, and you've probably seen the memes out there and things about what people look like when they've been on semaglutide too long, and that is the problem. They're not in the gym doing resistance training, and they're just not eating anything, and yeah, they're losing a lot of muscle mass. And the problem with the elderly, especially females, is a lot of bone loss takes place too. So these are definite concerns that we need to. Yes, that's there. But if you get them to do resistance training, we don't have the problem with the bone loss, and you can maintain the muscle mass.
So these are just people who are maybe taking the easy way out, and they're like, I don't want to do the hard work. I'll just take the drug. That's where these adverse effects are happening.
Yes, it is. It is. As long as I always just want to make sure because I don't view the drug as taking the easy way out. Now, what you said, I agree with that. If I'm just going to take the drug and not exercise.
Right. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yes, 100%. Because I do feel like the last ACSM conference I went to, this was like the big topic.
The national one? Or
the national one. And this was like the big topic. And it was interesting listening to so many different views. And one of the ways that one of them explained it, and I feel like this makes sense, is he showed a picture, and I forget the runner because I'm not into running as much, but it was some guy who ran a crazy fast marathon. And I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was a 2-hour marathon. I don't know. But The point is he asked a question. He said, you guys in here, raise your hand if you think you could train to do this, even if you trained. And of course, nobody raised their hand. And if they did, I'd call them liars. You know what I mean? And he said, well, why not? And obviously that person who he showed is a genetically gifted individual. And then he said, okay, so now but let's look at weight loss. We think that all you have to do to be like, then he showed up some picture of some shredded person. That is just train. And that may not be the case. If you add semaglutide, it kind of brings that genetic equality between the two. Mm-hmm. Now, to your original point, 100% you need to be doing resistance training. And that mitigates most of these. And so if you're taking it and you're not doing any exercise, I think you're a fool. But if you're doing resistance training 100%, then I think that this is a fine way. There are side effects such as GI disruption, right? Diarrhea, nausea, headaches. Those happen. But you look at any other extreme weight loss diet, there's side effects. Guess what they are? Diarrhea, being nauseous, constipation. So, I mean, it's not like this is some astronomically dangerous thing. At least the data hasn't suggested that yet.
And this isn't like some performance enhancing drug like I'm trying to gain muscle like a SARM or PED. This is something completely different in the way the mechanisms work in the body.
Oh, 100%. This is solely focused on appetite pathways, and you just won't be hungry. And if you talk about the performance side, I would say that it would be so counterproductive from a performance standpoint, where I need to eat, and sometimes I need to eat more than I want to, depending on what my outcome goal is. Yeah. Like this would be not what you'd want to do.
Do you think, if it hasn't already, I don't know, but do you think this is going to become prevalent, especially because the age limit has been lowered so much? for maybe people who need to make weight, like high school wrestlers to start taking this just to make weight for a competition, or people with the financial resources to do this who are maybe younger than we would expect, just trying to do this for some rapid temporary weight loss for competition, when in reality it might affect their performance because, again, their energy levels are lower and they just might not be able to perform as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not saying I think that it should, but I think that you're right. Let's go back to what I've been saying this whole time of balancing a contrary, right? One side of the sword, I think some people are overhyping like the negative, like we want to say how negative it is, right? And I think some of that's overhyped. But the other side of the contrary is it is getting really loosey on how they're giving it out, meaning we have a lot of these companies, and it's fine that they do it, but these companies that are making kind of their own like cocktail, right? Which we do this all the time. It happens. But the downside is, if anybody wants semaglutide, you can go get it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not FDA approved for everybody, but you can. Legally, you can. Like, meaning, so go back to your question. Like, if I wanted to get on semaglutide, and I don't really fit the BMI and all that stuff, I could easily do it. If my wife wanted to, she could easily do it. But none of us fit what it's been FDA approved to. There was some research coming out looking at younger children below the age of 18, and it showed effective weight loss. The problem is, though, we don't know any of the possible long-term side effects. We don't know. And so that I'm leery of that because we don't know enough about it there. But if anybody wants it, they can get it.
It's prescription, though, right?
Well, this is the thing, right? If you go to your general provider, right, they'll do blood work and they'll do a prescription. But you have a lot of these places around the valley where you don't need a prescription to get it, right? They'll sell it to you. It's going to be it's expensive. It's really expensive. $90 probably a shot, something like that.
$90 for one shot.
And you do it every week, unless you have insurance and it's approved for diabetes and those kind of things. But if not, I mean, it's $70-$90 a shot. And if you will pay that cash value, they'll find a way to make sure that you have it. And so yeah, that side of it, I think, could become an issue.
Do you need to cycle on and off of this stuff, or can you stay on it long term?
So if we talk about long-term efficacy of it, you're supposed to stay on it long-term.
You are.
And like, meaning if we're talking about the idea of you're going to be successful on this is the new you. Like, meaning this is what you do. Because the data shows you go off it, you gain the weight back. Because those pathways go back to normal. You see your food and it's like, well, I'm hungry again. And you just start eating again. Now, maybe that's not true for everybody. Maybe you taught yourself things, right?
Right.
Hopefully that's what's happening. And that's what people always say because it's so expensive. But that's usually not what's taking place.
Wow.
So we're going to play a quick game. I'm going to give you a hypothetical person. And then if you could try to give, I don't know if you want to call it an elevator pitch, but like a 60-second spiel as to why you should change this person's opinion on weight loss. So we have a 20-year-old female. She likes exercise, but she's afraid of resistance training because she wants to lose weight and she's afraid of how it might make her look. And so she's been not going to the gym. She's been running and doing a lot of cardiovascular intensive exercise, just not doing anything with resistance training.
Yeah.
She goes to you, tells you this. What do you say to her to try to convince her otherwise?
I always say two things. One, I say, I have been trying to look like those guys that she's scared of looking at for 20 years and cannot do it. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll be okay. And then secondly, and I say this to my wife too, I say, look around, assuming we're in the gym or whatever, at maybe the females where you're like, oh, I kind of aesthetically want to look like her. What are they doing? They're all lifting weights really heavy. All of them. That's what it is. Like that's the answer. And once you get them to see that, then usually you can overcome it. A lot, you can go into the hormone thing, but that's kind of, I don't like going that direction because sometimes we get so far down that road, it makes it sound like a female cannot adapt to training, and that's not true, right? But you can if you want to say that we don't have the same hormone profile. But if you say that, like, I've been trying to do that purposely, and that's not what I look like. You know what I mean? And look at these other women around here, what they're doing. The ones you want to look like, I promise they're not just walking on that treadmill.
Mm-hmm. I like that answer.
That sounded kind of specific, Jake. Is there someone in mind you're talking about?
No, I'm giving you another hypothetical right now. So you have, I'm just throwing one more at you. I want to take it the other direction. So say you have a 20-year-old male who's always in the gym and he's never doing cardio, and he's saying, well, I don't want to lose my size. What are you going to say to him to try to help him, get that good balance of resistance training and cardiovascular fitness?
Yeah, and there is a good balance, right? If you do heavy resistance training as a young male, you'll increase central arterial stiffness, and that data is very conclusive. If you take that same male and you add just a little bit of cardio, 30 minutes, maybe 3 days a week, you don't see any of those negative effects. So one, from the health standpoint, you want to be doing some cardio, right? But secondarily, HIIT training is a really good modality to get some aerobic work, even though you're doing sprints. And I understand that that's more of an anaerobic. But if you take the whole HIIT training session in its totality, it's very aerobic as far as if it's 20 minutes or whatever it is. And because they looked at a lot of studies on this, and you're not going to negatively affect muscle mass. Now, let's be fair. If this guy was in the gym and he was running 5 miles, 6 miles a day, yeah, you probably would. It would negatively affect some things. But adding in HIIT training, doing a couple days a week, it's going to help you. One, it'll probably help you perform better as far as weight-wise in the gym because you'll recover better. But two, it's going to do much better for your health as far as the arteries and other things like that.
No, it's really cool. Like, most people don't know about this, and it kind of baffled my mind when I heard Zach talk about it again, that there are structural changes of the heart during resistance training and during aerobic training. There's eccentric and concentric hypertrophy that can take place primarily in the left ventricle of the heart. And when we do a lot of resistance training, it causes, all that grunting and, kind of little Valsalva maneuver and stuff like that. It causes the aorta to become stiff for a moment, and that constant repetition over time causes central arterial stiffness to go up, which is not good. Am I doing good so far?
Yeah, man, this is impressive.
Keep going.
I need to teach your class, man.
I know.
I love XPhys. But he was saying that is a concentric hypertrophy, contraction of the heart. And what happens is that chamber, the left ventricle, during resistance training, if you have someone that only does resistance training, we see that central arterial stiffness does go up, and that the left ventricle, the structure of it, the walls actually increase in thickness. But when we do cardio and we look at aerobic athletes, we see that the diameter of their left ventricle increases because we need to increase preload, so it's going to expand more so we can push out more blood to the rest of the heart, which lowers afterload, which isn't good. Preload good, afterload bad. And so with cardio, we can increase preload but decrease afterload. And so it was kind of scary because we're all sitting in your class like, what, so we shouldn't do resistance training? Oh my gosh, what do we do? But really a simple fix is just add a little bit of cardio. And in the research, the study you showed us, they had their subjects do 45 minutes of resistance training followed by 45 minutes of cardio for an hour and a half total, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, well, obviously, like you said, nobody has time for that,
right?
So do you think that there might be like we can kind of meet in the middle where maybe I'll do 45 minutes to an hour of resistance training and then 15 minutes of cardio afterwards for a certain day of the week?
No, I totally do. In addition to that so it used to be, if we talked about resistance training, it was only you do a set, you wait at least 180 seconds, you do another set, and some people work out that way, and that's fine, and there's benefits. But with the shift to CrossFit, cross training, whatever you want to call it, a lot of these resistance workouts have an aerobic component. So if I look at my workout, I don't train like I used to anymore as far as a traditional bodybuilder. Now my goal is just not to get too fat as I get old. Like, that's my objective. And so I'll do, what did I do this morning? It was shoulders, right? So I'll do shoulder press and I'll jump rope for 60 seconds. And I'll do lateral raises, and then I go do box jump. So if you take that workout in totality, my average heart rate was like 80% of max. That's a pretty good aerobic training. So my point is, I totally think that you can mix them. You can get this cardio so many different ways. You just got to make sure you get it. That's the key, however you want to do it.
Yeah, and that's really good, just because who wants to do only resistance training? Like, I used to do only resistance training, and I was so burnt out, so inflamed, but it was because my ego told me, got to get bigger. Right. No matter what it is, just have to get bigger. That's my only goal. But now I've shifted my focus to become more of a functional athlete, and doing more cardio, it really does kind of help me with my resistance training, because I feel like, I hate to say my wind is better, but I feel like
your ability to recover between sets has increased.
That's what I meant to say.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I feel like building upon those weaknesses that you do have just makes you even more confident, just in your own body and your self-efficacy of yourself and what you can do.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you become that more well-rounded athlete that you're looking to be.
Yeah.
I think that if you can bring up your weaknesses while simultaneously capitalizing on your strengths, I think that makes for a really good combination in whatever you're trying to do, whether you're competing or not.
Yeah. And people are so, especially ones at local gyms, people I've met at my gym personally, they're so stuck on, I do resistance training only. It's always the younger guys too. And they do the same thing every week. And then this one guy I know, his bench, he's been at the same bench just about for about 2 or 3 years now since I've known him. The same exact bench. It's gone up a little bit, then it's gone down a little bit, but it stayed relatively the same. And he is just so pissed. And it's so sad that his bench has stayed the same. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. And so I ask him, what kind of training you're doing, how you eating, how's your stress. And over the years, I've seen him do the exact same routine throughout every single week. Nothing changed because his mind's convinced of the psyche that this is what I have to do to increase my bench. You know what I have to do? Bench. And you talked about that in class a few times where you're like, I want to increase my bench. The only thing I can do is bench. No rest, no nothing, just go at it. And if you get weaker, your body's like, oh, I need a break right now. You're like, no, I need to work harder. Work harder, actually.
Right.
Yeah, and people don't understand that you need to periodize your training, that you need to switch things up, because you'll just get burnt out. And your body, there's only so much your body can take.
Are you telling me you shouldn't take every single set to failure?
Tom Platz would be so mad right now if you heard me, dude. But yeah, that's one thing I've learned, to definitely switch it up. Otherwise, you do get burnt out easily, and it just makes working out not as fun when you do the same thing over and over again.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. I've gone through ups and downs where I'm excited for the gym. You go to sleep, you're excited to hit the gym, and then other times where you're like, I don't want to do this, right? And then you change your workout, and that excitement comes back. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of on topic with that, general opinion, observation, do you see that with people the people in your life who work out and who train, do you see a greater work ethic, an indifferent work ethic, or a lesser work ethic in them compared to people who don't work out?
That is a good question. I don't know if I would say that. Sometimes, but I don't know. Because let's go back to what you had said, Wes, and I'll even take me. Why did I start working out, right? Is it because I had some body dysmorphia? Maybe. Why did I continue? Maybe that was it. But is that tied into my work ethic? I don't know. Because as you said that, I'm trying to think of, I'll take my best friend. He's probably the most successful person I know, and he busts his freaking tail. Now, he's gone through periods of time where he's trained a lot. Like, he's done a couple Ironmans, okay? So this might not be a good example. But he goes through periods of times where he hasn't trained because he doesn't want to, for years, right? But his work ethic is still there. So I don't know if that's the case. But this is kind of interesting because if you go back, and I know training isn't the same as obesity, but if you go to obesity and you ask medical personnel, you show them pictures of an obese person versus a non-obese person, and you ask them what they think about those people's work ethic. They all rate the obese person's work ethic as less, even though they don't know them, right? And so it's almost like on face value, we assume that. And I'm sure that that's the case, but I don't think that that's always the case, because I think it's where you put your energy and focus. Obviously, we want people to turn their energy and focus to a lot of things, including health and fitness. But I don't know if that's always the case there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard to generalize something like that, especially if you don't have any type of meta-analyses. I'm not sure if we do or not. I think it would be fun to look into. But
no, I have no idea. One of you guys should propose that study. And we can do that. And we can get some survey on work ethic and ask about exercise. I think that is interesting. You guys let's write it down.
Only we weren't graduating.
I know.
I gotta come back, man. Come back.
There is research on cardiovascular exercise enhancing willpower production. I don't think there's any upon resistance training, but I know that intensive cardiovascular endurance exercise can stimulate hypertrophy in the anterior mid-cingulate cortex in the brain, the AMCC, which is governed by, in anyone with a normal diet, glucose, the primary energy substrate of the brain. And they have found randomized control trials where they assigned people to different intensities of exercise, and upon brain scan, the people who did intense cardiovascular exercise did have bigger AMCCs, and they were able to produce more willpower, which I think is an interesting subject. I'd love to go deeper into that and try to figure out more behind why. I don't know if it's the mental push that they get that they don't necessarily get with resistance training. I don't know if the mental push is harder because it lasts longer, but I'd love to kind of look more into that and see if that can go anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And I've never looked at any research on that, looking at that outcome. But if you look at aerobic exercise and we look at other brain developmental factors that might affect dementia, Alzheimer's, even normal cognitive or normal psychological things, depression and things like that, the brain is very plastic, right? Neural plasticity. And there is a lot of data suggesting that you can change things, neural development, as we increase oxygenation to white matter in the brain, that there are these benefits. And so that is very interesting. Yeah, I would like to learn more about it.
I do know the biggest takeaway I remember seeing from their conclusion was that they believe that it was the fact that they were doing what they didn't want to do that made them grow. And I remember Dr. Andrew Huberman was talking about this one time, and he made the point that if you're used to a resistance training lifestyle, or if you're used to working out and training hard and you enjoy that process now, you're not necessarily going to grow that region of the brain because you're already used to doing that. It's the people who go above that and do what they don't want to do, getting out of bed at 4 a.m. and saying, I don't want to do this sucks, but I'm going to do it anyway. Those are the people who they believe are going to benefit from this the most, who are actually, like you said, making the neurological adaptations and growing from that instead of doing what they're complacent with already.
Man, I get up Wednesday morning, 4:15, and I do not want to work out my legs. I don't want to do it. I can motivate myself for chest or back. I don't want to do it. But it's interesting. I get done, I'm always like, I feel pretty good. Do you know what I mean? Compared to the other days. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and Andrew Huberman, I've seen some takes on what he said about dopamine. He says the people that are most likely to succeed are those that can regulate their relationship with dopamine and pleasure and motivation versus those who can't. And he said addiction is a progressive narrowing of the pleasures or things in your life that do give you pleasure. Whereas people can be more successful, more happy. I'd say successful, more so happy. People are going to be happier if their lives feel more satisfied. They'll have a progressive expansion of the things that give them pleasure. Because addiction is the thing where it's like only this drug, only this coping mechanism gives me pleasure now, nothing else. And so this is the only thing I'll actually work towards getting in my life, which is interesting because I think exercise really, you do get a hit of dopamine after you get past that pain barrier into the pleasure threshold. But the beauty of exercise is that you do it over and over, again and again, build that discipline, improve that willpower, that self-efficacy, which kind of we take outside to the rest of our lives and apply it to everything else there.
Yeah.
It's progressive overload, but for the brain. And then you just keep going.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I have one more topic, unless Wes has anything else he wants to bring up. I want to get, and you can talk about whatever you want to talk about here. The floor is yours, but we want to get one hot take opinion of yours. This can be anything that the mainstream would consider not necessarily, something in line with what most people would agree with. Fitness, nutrition, it can be any of those.
Oh boy!
For example,
sit in one of his classes.
When we interviewed Antonio, his hot take was that he thinks that unilateral training is not as beneficial as people make it out to be in most circumstances.
For example, Bulgarian split squats, lunges, overhyped. He's more of a stick to the meat and potatoes. Barbell back squat, deadlift, bench press, all that stuff.
So we already talked about a lot of them, so I won't repeat them. But like the idea that you have to be lean to be healthy, right? I think that's nonsense. The idea that there's a height and weight that you have to fit in, and everyone, I think that's nonsense, right? All that stuff, we kind of talked about that a lot. One that we haven't brought up, and maybe it's off topic, but we talked about today next Phys Lab, is most of what people say about stretching, I think is total garbage. I think it's total nonsense. If we talk about the idea of let's do static stretching today in class we talked about static stretching. Can it do anything with DOMs, right? And we went over this recent meta-analysis that came out, and it does nothing. Like, meaning it does, you could do static stretching, you could do nothing, you could do cold water immersion. Guess what? There's no difference, right? Static stretching before exercise is going to decrease your risk of injury. Nonsense, right? And so most students don't like that because they were raised ever since they were in kindergarten saying, I got to touch my toes, I got to move my arm across my chest, and this will make me safe and warm me up. But the evidence, in my mind, is not there for any of that.
Mm-hmm. So you'd recommend a dynamic, generalize, and then a dynamic warm-up before you activate and potentiate in the body.
Yeah, the idea that static stretching is used synonymously with warm-up is just dumb, right? When we're exercising, you need to warm the body up 100%. And you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do some aerobic, you can use dynamic movements, but static stretching should not be part of the warm-up. Right, decreased performance on a lot of different metrics, decreased running economy. I mean, there's not any evidence that saying that you should do that.
Mm-hmm. Why is that? So if I go to the gym right now and do legs and I'm like, all right, I'm feeling a little tight, I'm gonna do static stretching right before. Does that loosen up my joints so they're not as stable as I'm squatting? What exactly is happening there?
Most of the evidence shows that when you do static stretching, we increase joint muscle laxity for a short period of time. It's just inhibiting the muscle spindles for a little bit, which is just that neural side of things anyways. I mean, it's probably not even a chronic thing, but I would argue that if you feel a little, quote, tight, you go warm up and you will feel much better anyways by increasing the temperature of the muscle. Yeah. And the stretching itself probably doesn't do anything. Students always will then argue, well, what about dynamic like stretching? And that's fine.
Like swinging your leg back and forth.
Sure. Or if you're doing if you're going to do, I don't know, all the things that you'd see NFL players do, right? High knees and all these things where you're moving through range of motion. And I'm like, well, yeah, that sounds fine. But the movement is increasing the temperature of the body. That's the benefit, right? It's funny because we think that we have to have extreme range of motions. And we don't. Think about it. If you go do a squat in a full form, right? Down and up. Like that has helped me achieve the range of motion that I need in my normal activities anyways. Why do I need to go beyond that? There's not a lot of rationale in my mind for that.
Try telling a coach that for your kids.
Oh no, trust me.
Football or baseball.
This is why it's never going to change, right? My kids are in young sports, and my son just got done with his flag football thing. And before, what do they do? All right, move your arm across your chest, bend down and touch your toes. And if that coach didn't do that, other parents, not me, probably would say, Coach, they got to warm up, as if it's a warm up, right? And so you're right, it's never going to go away, but most of the time I think it's nonsense. I remember first place I ever worked was Pure Fitness, and I remember charging these people, and I didn't even know what I was doing. This was 15 years ago maybe, and it was $70 for 60 minutes, and I spent 15 minutes helping these people stretch. Looking back at that, what a waste of time. Yeah. If they want to stretch, they can stretch. That's fine. But they're paying a lot of money. We could have done a lot more things in that time than sitting on the pad over there, touching my toes and putting my legs out and that kind of thing.
Well, that's why we bring you on here. So you can just put all your hot takes out there for the world. We'll be like, what is this guy talking about? Maybe I should listen to this guy.
Yeah, good.
How much time do we have? It's 3:55. You said you leave by 4?
I changed my plans around, so I just have our meeting at 5.
Okay, for sure. What about you, Zach? How are you feeling?
I should probably leave soon. I don't know if you have any other questions, though.
I did have one more.
Yeah, let's do it.
Back to weight loss and just being genetically predisposed. Is that the word? Predisposed?
Yep.
To being obese. How do you tell somebody that and they're thinking, oh, I don't know how to say it.
No, I get your question. We're starting with what I would say is a false notion, meaning and I like your question, so I'm not saying it's bad, but the way that the question is posed is assuming, and this is probably correct, that everyone needs to lose weight, or at least whoever we're talking to, right?
Right.
Now, that may be true. I'm not saying that there's not cases where people need to lose weight. Okay, you get outside of these normal ranges, and yes, risk goes up. But there is a wide range of weights that somebody can be at completely healthy. So that's where we have to start, and that's where I always start the discussion of, do you need to lose weight? Most of the time, to be healthy, they don't. Now, we have these people that are 600, 700 pounds. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? Now, we have to get to the reality, though. Most people, they say they want to lose weight because they want to be healthier. That's a lie. I totally think that's nonsense. They want to lose weight because they want to look different. And I have no problem with that, but we need to understand that. Because if you're telling me I want to lose weight to be healthier, I'm going to tell you I can help you be healthier. You don't need to lose weight. But then when you get down to it, they say, well, I want to look different. Okay, that's fine. Now that we're on the same page, you're going to have to starve yourself. And I'm being serious, to where you're going to be eating 1,200 calories. The people that have done it, even who have pre-genetic disposition where you're not going to be successful, it's going back to the Biggest Loser, right? 1,200 calories a day, 60 to 120 minutes of exercise a day. Is that what you're willing to do for it? And if they are, all right, let's do it, and you'll be successful. But if not, it's probably not going to be, you need to be happy with what you look like. And people don't like that.
No,
and that's why it's kind of fun for me, where I've backed up and said I'm going to go into the academic setting. And I don't have to convince people to do that. Now, having said that, there are some people, now we're talking about those who do need to lose weight. I am not anti-bariatric surgery. In our field, a lot of people, I feel like, now it's all semaglutide, but it used to be like bariatric surgery, that's a cop-out. No, I've met a lot of people who you need to get bariatric surgery, and that's your way to success. And you can be successful. Not everybody, 30-some-odd% fail, but most people, that means we got 60-some-odd% saying, I was able to do it. And I think it's a viable option. And the science in bariatric surgery is very interesting, and we haven't gotten into it today, nor do we necessarily need to, but if we talk about the set point theory, right, and the idea that we're regulating this set point theory, through diet and exercise, we don't have any evidence that can ever change. Meaning students always ask, well, if I lose 100 pounds and keep it off for a year, does my body re-normalize at a lower set point? No evidence says that's true. A lot of evidence says no. When you look at bariatric patients, we have a lot of evidence saying they're kind of resetting their set point. And the theory is the change of the gut, right? We know we can call the gut the second brain, and the microbiome and the role it has on energy extraction and crosstalk between the gut and other organs in the body. Lots of evidence that after the first year of post-bariatric surgery is no fun. You're not feeling good on that. We've kind of reset. And what we mean is you can kind of go back to eating. I'm not saying you're eating like garbage, but eating food that says you should be gaining weight, but you're not. And so that would be what I would say. Like if you're considered morbidly obese, I'm putting air quotations, and you really want to lose weight, and you're not willing to do what I said with the eating and exercise, maybe look into bariatric surgery or semaglutide. Now is given kind of that option there. And so it seems like now we're getting more tools to help those people. But
yeah, and most people, you think as an exercise science major, you'd be like, no, exercise can do it all. But I can tell you're very open-minded, keeping options open for different people who may be struggling with weight loss, which these are all very valid options according to the research.
Right. Well, and they should exercise, right? I just remember there was this person, her name Miriam Brixey. I used to kind of work with her in her church capacity, and she was probably 450 pounds. Maybe she wasn't that much, but she was confined to a bed. She wasn't around mobile, and she obviously needed to lose weight, and she was in a facility, and the goal was weight loss. That's why she was there. And I went and visited her once, and I said, Miriam, how you doing? And she was so excited because she was able to get up and walk down the hall and back. And of course I can congratulate her because it was hard for her to do, but that's not provoking weight loss. She needs to have bariatric surgery or to get, that's just the reality of the situation. And so there's people in so many different settings, and as exercise professionals, it's very easy for us to almost get on a high horse. Well, I did it, so you should do it. Well, people are different. Right. And ultimately our goal is to help somebody. So what tools can we embrace to do that?
Yeah. And I've noticed with everything you've mentioned, bariatric surgery, semaglutide, whatever it is, exercise should always be in there.
Always.
Because exercise, as you've said in your classes all the time, the ultimate poly pill.
Yeah.
And you don't really get any side effects from it like you do other medications.
Right.
So go exercise, everybody. Moral of the story, if you're going to take one thing from that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
I think we can wrap it up right there. That was perfect.
Awesome. Dr. Zeigler, thank you for being on here so much. I hope you enjoyed the setup and stuff.
That was fun.
It was amazing. Thank you for coming on, because just sitting in your class talking to you, this is stuff that people need to know. And every time I go home for Thanksgiving or, Christmas, whatever, people are telling me stuff, and I'm like, oh, I wish Dr. Zeigler can talk to him right now. So that's exactly why I love doing this. So just general population can hear this stuff, because they deserve to hear it too.
Yeah.
So thanks again for being on here.
Oh, one more thing. When we graduate, if you could have a talk with my mom about how diet artificial sweeteners don't cause cancer, that would be amazing.
Done.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Peace.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, one last thing. I do need a thumbnail real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we all just smile or pose for the camera? Good. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
There's so many things we could talk about.
Yeah.
Diet